right. Well, Ken, thank you very much for joining me today. So guys, listen up. You've been hearing his name throughout, I don't know how many, 20 some episodes, and you've heard me reference him, quote him. I don't think this podcast or the coach you know speaking right now to you would be here today if it weren't for this gentleman, Sergeant First Class Ken Weichert, the founder. I would say like the silent founder of the Mindfully Resilient podcast.
Oh, come on. It's you, buddy. I'm just one of your partners in crime.
Well, I truly appreciate it, and thank you very much. I think, you know what? I don't know what took us so long. I mean, you deserved, we needed you in the second episode. The first episode was inaugural. Even the inaugural episode, you had to be there. But I'm glad we're finally doing this now. And I totally appreciate everything from the beginning. And you know the story. And some of the listeners know a little bit of the story. So I'm going to give a quick recap of how we met. And what's really interesting,
that'd be
great. It's just how everything just snowballed in a good way, Right. So prior to 2013, and I shared the story with our friends on Project Hope, where I was low on the resilience tank. I had depression and really struggled with managing my temper. I'm not proud of that one. And then in 2012, my wife, Suzanne, was a fitness professional at the time and still is. And she went to the CanFit Pro conference in Toronto. She comes back at the end of the weekend and she throws me a GX United magazine. So GX United is a group fitness magazine. And you had an article in there and she said, you got to meet this guy. You got to meet Sergeant Ken. Really? And I wasn't sure. I was like, okay, because she knew I liked anything military. And at the time I was playing a lot of military simulation paintball and taking tactical lessons.
I remember that story. Yeah.
Oh gosh. And I was learning the 1, 2, 3, 4 position, all that stuff to breach a room. Yeah. And so I'm like, okay, fine. So the following year, 2013, I go in as a fitness enthusiast and I sign up for your session, the boot camp session outside. I was supposed to be indoors, but you said,
goodness, right. That Sunday morning where the cops came.
Because there was a noise complaint. Yes, I wouldn't blame them on a Sunday morning with the music blasting downtown Toronto. And
my voice is loud enough.
Oh gosh, it projects. It projects. You don't even.
I remember when the police came. They shut down the PA system, and then they stayed there. And then in between intervals, I came over to the police. And I said, really sorry about this. We turned off the PA system altogether. And he goes, but it's still the same volume. I said, what do you mean? He goes, you. I said, yeah, that's my drill sergeant voice. He goes, but I'm sticking around. I'm getting sweaty just watching.
So you're like scared and you're nervous. What are they going to say next? And all of a sudden he wants to hang around.
Yeah, I'm not in my country. I'm from the USA and I'm in Canada and I'm wanting to really make a good impression. It's the beginning of my civilian fitness career, really, for the most part of my major part of my journey. And then there was, I think 4 policemen, and everyone in Canada is really nice, right? And I'm not used to that because some of the violence that I used to seeing in some of the other areas of the world is not what I get in Canada. So I didn't really know what to expect, but they stayed the entire class, and that was your first experience with me. So go on.
Yeah, well, I didn't last. I'll tell you right now the truth. I did not last 20 minutes. And there were sand bells and jumping jacks with the tubes. And at one point I was gassed. But I was telling sharing my story with the Project Hope team that's where I started feeling like I belonged.
Yes.
Where I belonged somewhere, where I felt a spark. And and after that, I remember we did my first stack plank with you. I was like, I'm going to try this out.
Oh yeah. The photo op at the end where we do the triple decker plank or something like that. It was first a double decker, right? Yeah. Go on.
And I remember that photo. And every time I see that photo, it just brings back some great memories.
Yes, that's what it was supposed to do. Exactly. Because, when we're connected like that, when we're brothers at arms, It's supposed to bring back the good memories of the fight we've been through together.
Yeah. And it's just, it brings a smile to my face when I see that all the time. And I'm like, this is where it all began in a way. And
it grew from there, because it wasn't just boot camp classes and circuit training and all that. It's if I recall, you even had the opportunity to sit in with my wife's life coaching program and my resilience training program years ago.
Yeah, well, yeah. So I didn't know about Stephanie back then, but I knew she was. You mentioned something that she was like in the room next door. So I didn't have the opportunity to meet her that year.
Right.
And I remember that. So later that afternoon, I attended the resilience workshop, Road to Resilience, and and it floored me. I actually had tears to my eyes because I knew, and you saw Suzanne. So my wife, she was pregnant with our first. Yeah. And I'll tell you, this is okay. And this comes into
I love your kids. Oh, I love your daughters.
But oh gosh, and Abby talks a lot about you too. After every family boot camp,
she was scared to death of me at first.
But then a week later or a day later, she goes, "I want to do Mr. Ken's class again." And we're just like,
oh, the Operation Family Fit obstacle course with the parents and the children. Oh wow, what a joy to watch her face completely light up while holding your wife's hand while running down those lanes. It was and I know we're jumping ahead because you were talking about the beginning when we first meshed and all this, but you're right. It was about looking at that one dimension of fitness that, I mean, at the time we're talking around 2015, right? It was
13.
2013.
We met in 13.
So but when is it that you had my first resilience class? Was it 2013?
That was the workshop.
Wow!
That was the lecture.
Oh my goodness! Well, let's look back then, because that really sells this point that it was during a time in the fitness industry that we really weren't talking about the emotional dimension. We used to look at fitness and say, fitness is 80% nutrition and 20% physical fitness. And, we came forward and said during the Road to Resilience, I know you remember, is that we said that, fitness is in 7 dimensions, really, because the word fit is to make you better about something that you're deficient in your life. Really, that's the general 40,000-foot view. Oh, well, what that means is that, I'm not eating right. That's nutritional fitness. I'm not working out enough or the right way or not at all. And that's physical fitness. And then the emotional fitness, that's the big thing. That's the sticking factor, because, the problem I had, I've been in the military now for I'm going on my 33rd year of total military service between active duty and the reserves in the Army National Guard in the state of Tennessee where I live. And, the thing that is tough for me as a facilitator and as a fitness and as a leader among soldiers is that how do I get them to do the training during the 28 days that they're not in front of me, because I only see them 1 week in a month, 2 days a month, right? And same thing for personal trainers. You see them maybe once, twice, 3 times a week if you're lucky, right? So what are they doing in the other days? Probably the same old bad habits, because they're waiting for that accountability piece by being right in front of you, okay? And so that was the big thing. And when I realized is that if that was the difference between influence and impact, when you influence someone, you motivate them. But when you impact them, there's a heart change. And when there's a heart change, there's a lifestyle change. And so I said, how can I approach that? That's through the emotional dimension. When you're sitting there and they're warming up on the treadmill, not saying that's how you warm up someone is, simply by sticking them on the treadmill, but let's just go through a little role-playing exercise. They're warming up on the treadmill and you just finished somebody, you're looking over your notes to see what you're going to do with that next person. And, you're talking to that person. And in the first 5 minutes of that warm-up, that session with you, what are you normally listening to? What are they normally just yakking about? Their problems. I hate my job. My kid was up all night because he's sick, and I realized, oh my goodness, personal trainers have something that true psychological health counselors, clinical psychologists take numerous sessions to get to. That point of vulnerability and that point of victory through trust. So when I realized, wait a minute, we're already life coaches. And so I started using the stuff that I learned from the University of Pennsylvania School of Positive Psychology while studying under Dr. Martin Seligman, who's the grandfather of positive psychology and resilience. And I started using it. And then while I'm listening to, this person warming up on the treadmill, I had this little emotional fitness, I guess I call it a clandestine grenade, right? And I dropped it right there out in the conversation, right there on her heart. And she had this epiphany, right? And once I knew that her eyes lit up and she had this revelation about where she needed to go in her life, imagine how good the workout was after we approached it from here first, the heart voice first. It was exponentially better. And so, emotional fitness and social fitness, that bonding, that connection, family fitness, and I would even say financial fitness is the sixth piece, right? Even though we don't have direct access to that, but I've occasionally brought in people to my boot camp programs that were financial freedom experts and do these workshops once every 3 months during our wellness retreats, and have them talk about how to eliminate debt. And that, because it's a proven fact, and stated in the Veterans Administration that over 90% of the divorces that happen in the U.S. military because of finances. And so if that's something that they're lacking in their life, isn't financial fitness something that we could do, or at least take a look at on the way that we can help lift them up in some way and make them feel better than they were before? And then there's spiritual fitness too. For me, it's my relationship with God. And for someone else, it might be meditation. But those are 7 dimensions right there. And once you and I got acquainted and we were sharing notes about that experience from the road to resilience being the emotional fitness piece, I think you too understood that it was the sticking factor that was definitely working for me and my leadership efforts with both the military and with civilians.
Mm-hmm. And that's what got me, is that you just connected. And the way you teach, you say you lead from the heart, teach from the head.
Correct.
And you inform, impact, empower, by connecting, developing rapport, and building a relationship. And
exactly.
That's what happened. And I always use that as a foundation when I meet a new. It doesn't have to be my athletes, my students. It could be anybody else. And
right.
What I really picked up from, in our years together, and years in our friendship, our mentorship together, was the aspect of leadership and fitness. And I find that this is what is missing. And then it's not just fitness, it's in general, but through through the boot camp, the workshops that you have led, through the conferences and online, even with Project Hope right now, which we'll be talking about shortly. It's not what you say, it's how you say it.
Yes, John C. Maxwell. When I got certified by him in 2015, that was another eye-opener for me, because you're right, leadership is the fundamental part of how we can excel as a coach, not just a trainer. No offense to the people that are still using that language as a personal trainer, but if that's the frame of mind, then what happens is we're limiting our beliefs about how much effect we can have on people. And when John C. Maxwell came out and said that the purpose of a leader is to improve the lives of those that follow them, that's it. And I just went, oh, that's it. Because, I was constantly trying to think of myself as a manager of plans and operations, but that was the difference between the what and the why. A manager manages the what, but the leader influences and impacts through the why. Why do we do this? Why do we exist on the earth? Are we simply a personal trainer? Or do we look at our role in life as someone that's going to improve someone else's life, lift them up, and help them reach success? That's beyond the limits of personal trainer. And that's more like thinking like a coach. And yes, and that is true leadership.
Yeah. And that's what I felt. And that day in 2013, it just skyrocketed, because after that, I attended. I actually got certified, and my notes here. So for listeners right here, I'm holding up to the camera my notes from my first workshop, my certification level 1 boot camp.
Oh
Right here,
yeah, man. Oh, that was amazing too.
June 2016. So we've
Yep.
been like I'm attending your workshops, but then we had the certifications available in Canada around
Yep.
that time. So I took
Canada
advantage of
was
that.
amazing about that. Yeah.
And I did back-to-back sessions, like level 1 and then level 2 right after.
Right. That was the year that we were doing a double. That's right.
Yeah. And so, and that's where like it all, it's a snowball. And I'll just say this is that 6 years later, when you did the pilot for the Family Fit, Operation Family Fit,
Right.
my daughter, she came to your session. And that's the one. She was scared. I have a picture where she's holding on to Suzanne, and she's like, "Oh," and you're like, "Hi, I'm Mr. Ken, and how are you?" And you're like so gentle, so like like the father figure, and
Yeah, but
she's
look,
scared.
even if I sound with a soft voice, I've got the sort of the menacing Bruce Willis that does push-ups look.
I think it was the camo, but you know what? She's seen me.
Yeah.
I don't think she ever saw me wearing camo, and
Right.
so, but you impacted her, and you know how you see, you know how you say, rather than leaving, living a legacy with someone, but leave a legacy within someone.
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
something.
never. Yeah, a legacy is not what you leave for someone; it's what
Um,
you leave in or inside of someone. That fire to constantly strive for excellence instead of excuses.
mhm. And
That's the
that's
comprehensive version. Yeah.
And that's what happened. That's what happened right there. Because now, after that, she's been impacted. She talks about you. She sets up boot camp obstacle courses, taking my Liebert fitness equalizers and
Oh,
putting them
she's still
around.
doing that? That's
And the
amazing.
still does. And she'll ask me, Daddy, can we work out? So you'll see her. She'll grab a 10-pound kettlebell, start swinging, and then like do 3 reps and go to the next station. But she creates these obstacle courses, and
Wow.
yeah, seriously, she could set up the next class. And so, but just think about it. If you think about it, I met you. She was maybe through like Suzanne, well, Susie, she was 8 months pregnant, 8 months pregnant. So we're talking about like almost there. And then 6 years down the road or 5 years down the road, she's there like doing your
Yeah.
boot camp classes. Like you see
Yeah.
like how it just ended up. And I look at that, and I was like, wow. And I was, when we did, and that little video we did for you as a tribute, as a thank you,
Man,
we did
that
this.
just I was choked up inside trying to hold the gusher of tears of joy right there on that Zoom call when you guys presented to me. I had no idea,
Oh,
but
we
it
all
was
got
just
together.
it was such this wonderful, bundle of grace and happiness all rolled into a short video.
Well, and it was like we wanted to do something. We wanted to do something, and when I was helping the team put it together, because I like doing that. I like stitching everything together. And I had a bunch of clips from the conferences I took as a social media volunteer and as a delegate.
Yep.
And first off, I'm going to say that the shoutbacks, the cadence call,
Yes.
you will hear in the background the people who shout back are all of the leaders from the Project Hope team, a lot of them. And the last bit, when Steve goes encore, that was Abby recorded twice, layered on top of each other. And she was standing there, recorded it. And she keeps on singing that every time after the last boot camp we did at the conference, she was singing that. By the way, listeners, if you're wondering what we're talking about, there's an initiative we're doing right now, a program called Project Hope, to instill hope in for people who need that hope in times of a storm. And we, as a team, the leadership team, so the keynote speakers, we got together and created this thank you video for Ken and Stephanie for giving us the hope we needed in a time of chaos. And so we did this little tribute video, and it was fun. And you know what? And I saw the video, like, and then I put the clips of Abby, and I was like, wow. I was just like amazed. And I was looking at all these photos, and I was like, the timeline is just amazing just to look back. And so I'm going to say thank you again for everything you're doing for us, for me. I mean,
My absolute pleasure. It's if you really want to live like a coach and a leader and lift up others, that those are the things that you just do selflessly and instinctively, so that you can live by those values.
And you know what? And there's me like, and you know what? You have been a role model for me as well as I
It goes
deliver my
both ways, bro.
message.
You've kept me grounded, and when because I always go in thinking that who are the ones that have always been there during my development, and so I've bounced a lot of ideas back off of you, and you've been there a great sounding board for these things. So I appreciate you just the same.
Oh man, that's why we're brothers, we're
Yep.
family, and you know what? It's we're in this together.
Good.
And this is actually going to lead into my question. I love asking this
Okay,
question.
good. Let's do this.
You know what? We're already in it, and I'm going to say, because we know Sergeant Ken, fitness instructor, presenter, soldier.
Yeah.
The list goes on, father. But who is Ken Weichert beyond the business card? What is your why, your purpose? What drives you?
During that one class that I think that you took with me called Mastering the Game of Growth, we talk a great deal about, understanding your why, your purpose, and your passion. And during the development part of that particular workshop, which is now a mastermind that we'll be probably doing together very soon, Project Hope Academy, we talked about what it takes to discover this. And Pablo Picasso, famous of course artist, was made famous for this quote that he said that that no one can prove that he actually wrote, but the meaning of life is to find your gift, and the purpose of life is to give it away. And so what I got from that is that if we continue to serve and help others, isn't that something that will always keep us going and will always make us better through the communion that happens through community? And so I said, well, how do we do that? And then that's when we talked about Tommy Newberry's strategies through his book, Success is Not an Accident, a great goal-setting coach. And we talked about how to do a mission statement. Because a mission statement is a representation of your vision, and your vision is a representation of your why. Because I'm not just a trainer, I consider myself as a coach, someone that's going to look at all of the dimensions of fitness, what I call 7 dimensions of fitness. I call it comprehensive fitness, and which is also what the University of Pennsylvania calls it. And so in approaching it with this helps me understand the why. Okay. And so in doing that, I have to say, okay, what's the mission statement? How can I use this mission statement? Well, the mission statement is a written articulation of how you see yourself in the best given potential, written in the present tense. I say again, it's a written articulation of how you see yourself in the best given potential, written in the present tense. And you know this too, because we've gone through some of the same training, brothers. So you know that the reason why it's written in the present tense, and for your listeners that, or your watchers, your viewers, your audience members that don't know this, is the reason why it's written in the present tense is because when you actually review it, you read it, or you hear it, if you've pre-recorded it and you're listening to it as your own little personal podcast for your own development, when you hear it written in the present tense, you think it's true today. And what happens is it actually gets your mind to think of it as a GPS, a map, or a compass. And it's really, the way you look at that is that if you were hiking in the woods without any cell phone coverage, without a map, without any GPS, without a compass, what are you? You're lost. And isn't that how most people that we know in our industry are going through their lives every single day? I did consulting for several companies, and I remember going in and asking the personal trainers during the assessment phase of the consulting, saying, What are you doing for your clients tomorrow? Well, the same thing I'm doing today. What are you doing for your clients the next day? Same thing I'm doing today. What are you doing? What are you really doing? That's for someone that's lost, that doesn't understand the why. Because the what are the programs that you produce. The why is, why did you produce it that certain way? And so you got to dig into that. And, you know that how I questioned you and some of the other people that are in our little circle of influence that day. And I said that, how you got to make certain that when you understand your why, that you start to focus on all your goals are growth mindset goals that support that why. Because you've got your vision, you've got your goals, and you've got your tasks or steps. People call them steps, but they could be tasks. And that's the hierarchy. And everything should drive up to support what your vision is. And because if you don't use your mission statement, which is a written articulation of how you see yourself in the best given potential, written in the present tense as if it were today, if you don't have that, which is a representation of your why, and you're not constantly reviewing it, you are going to go through some of your days lost. And what happens when we're in the woods, like I said earlier, what happens when we're in the woods and we're lost, we get nervous, and we try and get back on path. That's life. Mm-hmm. But if we constantly live up to the values written in our vision through our mission statement, then we can stay on track. Like, it's the I am statements of life. Like, I am a great daddy that teaches my children a new life skill every single day. I am a life changer that lifts a new soul up every day with one dimension or more of fitness. And most of all, I am a great husband that learns something new about my wife every single day. We got to live up to those values. And I realized this one time when I was traveling over 250 days a year, over to China and everywhere. And I remember there was one time I was in China, I was exhausted. And as soon as I got to the hotel, I only had 4 hours to sleep before I was supposed to go on and brief people on this new wave of fitness and what they're supposed to do with their new initiatives in wellness. And I said, well, why is it that I can't sleep? I feel like I'm lost. And I went, I didn't talk to my wife in 30 hours. And that doesn't live up to my values. So I called her up. I said, honey, is there something maybe interesting or unusual or something I haven't heard of that happened since I saw you last? As a matter of fact, yes. And she goes, la, 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 la. And I realized that I was living up to the values of discovering something new about my wife every single day and growing with her. And when I did that, I was living up to the values that are stated in my vision through my mission statement. Mm-hmm. And that is the difference between impact and influence. We've got to make certain that when we're making these goals, that they're growth mindset goals and they support the values that we have in ourselves to change others. And you asked me recently too, what is it about you that drives you in the service industry? And so when I'm serving, I actually feel like I'm living. Now, I can also quote, to be more specific, I can quote, Gary Chapman's book, The 5 Love Languages, which I recommend to any of your—
Great book.
Amazing. It saved my marriage. Because Gary Chapman states that we all have 5 love languages that we use, and some have more precedence in our lives for giving and receiving than others. And, you can take his 5-minute quiz on his website for free, the 5lovelanguages.com. And I realized that, after taking this, that my love language, how I show love, is acts of service. Okay, so I figured since I've been married to my wife for so long, she also had the same love language. Boy, was I wrong. So I got back from Iraq and I was exhausted. I was on a different time zone, but I wanted to show her some love. So I made this gourmet meal. It took me 3.5 hours. Cooking away, making this gourmet meal. And we're sitting there and we're talking. Everything's great. We're talking. But I realized that my head voice started talking to me saying, hey, she's not complimenting the meal. WTF, right? I didn't know what was going on, but that's my head voice talking to me. My heart voice said, chill out, have the meal, enjoy the company. All right. And so I'm enjoying the company. And when we're done, I take the dishes, I take it over to the dishwasher, first rinse them off in the sink, put them in the dishwasher, say, hey, honey, let's move it over to the couch and catch up. Well, she lit up inside. Quality time spent. That's her love language. That's how she receives love more than the other 5. Or the other 4 rather, because they have quality time spent. And so once you pursue the love language of your client, your family member, your friend, whatever it is, once you pursue theirs first, what happens is that they recognize what you're trying to do and the value of that connection. And so what happens is, 5 minutes into the conversation, she knew I was tired, but she knew I was really trying to make an effort in her love language. She all of a sudden snapped to it and she goes, honey, by the way, that meal was amazing. Full
Started
circle
speaking
comes
your
around.
language, yeah. And I read, and by the way, speaking of that book, The 5 Love Languages, it was actually recommended. You recommended it, and then also Rod McDonald, who was a coach as well.
Oh, yeah, he's great. Love that guy.
At a time where things were, even a couple of years ago, there were things that, we needed to work on some stuff. I got laid off from my job. I'm starting to really dig my feet and get solid footing as a full-time fitness professional.
Right.
And we have, a little bit of conflict. So we need to work on it. And I read this book and I took the test first. I read the book and everything made sense. I even had my friend do the same thing, took the test twice. The thing is, then I asked him, ask your wife to take the test too. Well,
yes, that's the key right there.
And I said, but he kept on resisting, saying, no, she will never do it. Ask, make a time. There will be a time when she's going to do it.
Yeah.
She did it and he did it again. His love language changed. And I said, and he's like, well, it's weird. But no, it's not weird because you're more aware of what her love language is. Your love language changed based on that. And you realize what's more important for you. And now for me, I realized my love language, and I've always knew what it was. I didn't have to read the book but I just had to understand it. Words of affirmation. And that's where I feel like I get that connection because remember that thing about belonging where prior to 2012, like I didn't feel like I belonged in groups, even though I felt like I belonged,
which also kills your understanding of significance if you don't feel belonging, that you don't feel significant and purposeful and valued. And what happens is that it kills your self-esteem.
Yeah, no, exactly. And then I remember, and then I read that and then everything made sense. And then Suzanne did her test as well. She read the book too. And her love language, she did the test a couple of times, but the main ones are acts of service and quality time. So occasionally when I can, or I remember, I'll make her a cappuccino in the mornings around 10 a.m. and twice a week, and that's the stuff, little stuff like that. Even preparing a Mother's Day brunch, and this was the perfect opportunity, being in self-isolation, in physical distancing, where we can't go out to restaurants during this COVID-19 pandemic. It was an opportunity to do all this stuff, and so we built, made a nice breakfast, but it's just doing the little things. And I think everybody should definitely, read the book. And it's an easy read too.
I would say it's a small book. In fact, it's one of those little airport reads, even the way it's shaped, it's cut in something that you can fit in your back pocket, right? That's how small it is. And for your audience members, again, you're going to have all of those love languages. And so we already talked about acts of service and we talked about words of affirmation. And we talked about quality time spent. And then there's physical touch and gifts. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, when I went to Iraq, it's a big custom thing that when you come to the host of that Iraqi sheikh's house and you come with a gift during the greeting, you've shown love at the highest regard. And so I pursued that while trying to create connection. And that's really what the difference is between a team and a tribe, because I value that as that how we're going to lift someone's life through the connection of love and grace. And isn't that what we need right now? I mean, and not to go on a sidebar, but I think if we look through the lenses of grace, and that we dealt with life with more empathy, we probably wouldn't see such a lack of humanity in the world. And so I'm glad we're on the same sheet of music about how we are living by internal value and not by external validation.
And you know what? I'm going to say something. We're talking right now as if it's easy. It is not. It requires a lot of work, and we will catch ourselves.
And it's daily.
Yeah, we will catch ourselves, and we're like, oh, and you know, we will. I will say, quote unquote, trip, but it's getting up again and not repeating it. Even if you repeat, like, make sure it doesn't happen regularly.
Yeah.
You just make that awareness. And
oh, dude, I'll be transparent with you for your, especially for your audience members. That, during this COVID crisis thing, and depending on when you release this, but during the time that we've been in general community quarantine, or some areas in enhanced community quarantine, I've been there are times that I've been a stress bucket too, and it hadn't been for friends, family, and everything that. I probably would, it'd take me longer to recover, because, through your support system is how that you can recover faster. Dr. Al Siebert wrote the book called The Resiliency Advantage, and he talks about the 3 key measures of resilience, as that, your support system, genetics, and how you think are the 3 key measures that you pull on to face adversity head on and turn that adversity into an advantage. Mm-hmm. And which might be a good segue to talk about resilience.
Yeah, well, resilience. I want to know, like, how do resilience, but not talking about like resilience came into your life, but being a teacher of resilience. How did that begin for you? I mean, I have a couple of ideas.
Yep.
But how did that begin for you? I'll actually let you explain.
Yeah. So here it was 2009. Okay. And there was no such thing really as a resilience credentialing program under positive psychology yet. We knew that there were start to be some announcements through certain periodicals that the University of Pennsylvania under Dr. Martin Seligman and Dr. Karen Rivich and would be coming forward with their own curriculum and be the first of its kind. But, and it was 2009, and I had gotten back from Iraq in 2004 and 5. No, what, 2003, 4? Yeah. Ooh, wow. And that from that tour. And it was years later, I was still dealing with some PTSD, some things that would trigger me. And then the problem about PTSD is people say, well, you can get rid of PTSD. They're liars, because PTSD is permanent. PTSD is permanent. I've been doing this a long time. I have more hours teaching resilience than any other soldier in the Army National Guard. Guaranteed. I know I do. And so PTSD is permanent. And here's the reason, okay? Because if you look at the 40,000 foot view, is that post-traumatic stress disorder is a response to a traumatic thing that's happened in your life. Thus the word post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay, so that would mean that everyone has PTSD, because everyone has had a traumatic thing that's happened in their life. No one is immune from trauma. There's no way. And some people's lives have more trauma than others. It's just that. So it's permanent. Now, how we manage it and how we're able to turn that stress into strength and those obstacles into opportunities, that's what separates us from being resilient and non-resilient. And so I realized in 2009, man, not only have I still got some junk, but a lot of my soldiers, because I'm still in the military, I'm still in the reserves. Remember, I've been in for 33 years straight. I joined in 1988. Yes, Okay, some of your listeners weren't even alive then. All right, so
I was in grade 1 walking around.
stop. Okay, yeah, okay. All right. So, and I remember my soldiers were coming back, and okay, and the reason why I was really moved were two different reasons. One, I was sick of living like this. Now, isn't it a shame that it often takes us to hate something for us to actually make a change in our lives? You know, like we look in the mirror and say, man, I hate the way I look. I got to get back in shape. Or I hate to feel like this. I hate to have these arguments with my wife because I'm triggered about something which had nothing to do with her. It had everything to do with me and my experiences in Iraq, or even as far back as childhood, right? And so I'm sick of this. So that hate made me want to move into some effort of change, to pursue healing and then happiness, all right? And then the other reason why I really pursued this education was because there were soldiers that were still going on tours, and they were coming back, and the suicide problem in the U.S. military, awful. I mean, there were quotes on social media saying that people were doing these movements of 22 push-ups a day to raise awareness for the 22 suicides a day, which was an incorrect statistic because the Veterans Administration had done additional study, and it was really 38 to 44 soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines in the U.S. military that were taking their lives. And I know Canada is not immune from this because there are a lot of Canadians that have dealt with the same thing. It's just that your numbers are less because you've got, less of a population and pool to draw from. But that doesn't mean that it's at all less of an effect of what's going on with national readiness and what's going on with the family fronts. And so here it was. I said, well, I want to make a change. I want to stop these suicides. And so the best thing I could do was be the first person in that class. I was in the very first class in 2010, January 2010. And I remember 180 soldiers, most of them drill sergeants, because they're the first people to see those soldiers as soon as they come in and get indoctrinated, right? And so me and I was just there representing the state of Tennessee, and it was the game changer. It was everything changed from that point on, because that's where I realized that if we don't tap into this first, they won't see the value in anything that we teach them. That's why I always said very, commonly in our boot camp classes, you got to lead from the heart and teach from the head, because too often as personal trainers, we come in and, well, today we're doing 80% hypertrophy and 20% general fitness. Who cares? People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. That's what they want. And that was the game changer. And so then since then, though, I started to really say, well, what's going on with other forms of life coaching? And that really, no one will teach you this. This is something that I've discovered because my wife has numerous life coaching certifications. And I've, of course, living in with her, I've had to be the sounding board for her certifications. And so we've seen that there's really 3 divisions that we believe are in the life coaching world. You've got clinical psychology. That's the oldest one, right? Mm-hmm. Where the psychological health counselor, like the marriage counselor, the family counselor, whatever it is, they will give you guided interrogatives to help you unpack what's going on. They won't tell you what the answer should be, because that's an intervention. They give you guided interrogatives for you to unpack it. That sometimes takes numerous sessions. Now, I'm not going to take anything away from that division of life coaching. In fact, I think that is the ground you stand on. Like in the fitness world, personal training is the ground you stand on. Not group fitness, no offense, but personal training is really the ground you stand on. What can you do with that first individual before you talk about the theatrics of a group? It must first start with personal training, and then that kinesiology, that physiology, okay? And so that's one division. The second division is the polar opposite. It's like Tony Robbins and strategic intervention. What happens is that, Tony Robbins would hear what's going on and say, nope, that's messed up. This is what you should be doing. Now, that's high risk, could be high yield, could be high failure. Stephanie was also trained by Tony Robbins. She's also trained in the foundational approach of clinical psychology and through Valerie Burton and the CAP Institute. And then there's the newest division since 2010 officially, even though it's been around since 2006 through Dr. Martin Seligman, which was positive psychology. And the vehicle for that was resilience. Now, whereas clinical psychology, they give you the guided interrogatives for you to unpack the solution. And then the polar opposite being strategic intervention, where no, you're messed up. This is the way it should be going. Okay. All right. Of course, I'm really giving the Cliff Notes version. And then resilience. Resilience, we realize that we're all messed up. How can we turn that stress into strength? How can we really look at the true meaning of success, which is success is when your dreams are bigger than your doubts, and you can't even see that until you're able to take the junk that's going on in your life and turn it into some sort of way of flourishing. And that's really what Dr. Martin Seligman talked about in his book that he released called Flourish in 2011, which is really like 50% of the resilience course from UPenn right there. Now that's going to probably up his sales a little bit right there, because he says that we talk about wellness, but wellness doesn't approach everything, because flourish is really an act, like love. Love is not an emotion, it's not a feeling. It's an intentional act. Well, wellness is a state, but when you flourish, you're really not only in a state, but you're also intentionally living in a flourishing life. And that's when fitness is better than it ever has been. And that was the game changer. And so resilience is what settled in my heart. That's what I've been approaching. And Stephanie got it also certified by Dr. Brene Brown, and her training at the time was focused on shame resilience, because too often in life when we face obstacles of any kind, we take on guilt and shame. And guilt is, I did a bad thing, but shame is, I'm not good enough. And shame, when you're in a state of shame, it's hard to see the value of what resilience really is, because truly resilience means is that there's two things that can happen to you when you face an obstacle of any kind: fall apart or bounce back. Mm-hmm. That's it. When you realize those are the only two things that can happen when you face that obstacle of any kind, when you realize that, you also realize, well, falling apart is not an option. It's not an option. Okay, now I've eliminated that. Now I'm turning toward the other side of that coin, bouncing back. Well, when you face that adversity head on and you bounce back, you never bounce back to where you were before, because what you go through, you grow through. You learn from your experiences. Mm-hmm. And so when you've eliminated falling apart and you look at growing from the experience, now there's a time to mourn. I get that. That's healthy. It's healthy to go through that process. But no matter what you've been through, falling apart is not an option, but you're going to be better from the experience. And it's hard to see it when you're in the fog of war. That's right. Period. But if that's the only other option, then falling apart and then being better than you were before somehow, then realizing that trauma is easier to face because of that understanding of resilience.
And I agree with that. And there are a couple of points, especially with what's going on right now, in a different scenario, where we hit a pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, mm-hmm. especially for a lot of businesses, my fitness, and also my colleagues in the fitness industry, or in the fitness family rather, they got themselves stuck on a stranded ship.
Ooh,
a lot of them.
Good metaphor.
But then it's like they're looking at social media. They're looking at all these people.
Which is worse.
And there's a new term, and in a future episode, I'm going to talk about it. FOMO, fear of missing out.
Ooh, that's good.
Then we have these, these souls that are looking externally, seeing people doing stuff on social media, on Instagram Live, Facebook Live, all these workouts, and they feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not. You brought up the idea of shame resilience, being not good enough, and they see that I'm not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not good, because they see this and they don't have this esteem. But what if you do? What if we took that first step, to row the ship instead of sitting there watching everybody else in safe lifeboats, life rafts.
Right.
And why don't you take the helm, try to steer it, set up the sails, do something to move forward. And we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. And I fell into this. Because I saw people when this first started going live every day, and I felt it put a lot of burden on me because I had to do that. Then a wise friend of ours, Natalie Lacombe, actually
I love her. She's amazing.
She made an interesting comment about don't feel pressured into doing this.
Yeah.
Do what you, and giving free workouts. Do what you need to do right now for yourself. And that's one idea. And so you brought that up about, not good enough. And that just triggered a thought where you are good enough.
Right. You are worthy. Our life song matters to somebody. Somebody needs to hear our life song, period.
And it doesn't have to be the masses.
Premise of Stephanie's book, everything I would have said, as you know, and because we've got to be able to say that life song. And I loved your metaphor about being in that rocky boat, right? And just taking the oars and rowing through it. Because isn't it true that our biggest stories are always produced from our strongest storms? It's a fact.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you grab the oar and you start rowing toward your goal, you're working on your inwardness. And when you work on your inwardness, you are able to have a better efforts of outwardness. Because you were also referring to what's going on in the crisis right now and the things we've been dealing with. And I really look at the crisis as, the power of the pause. It was a necessary interruption. It was necessary for me, because for me, like John C. Maxwell said, a crisis doesn't make us, it reveals us what's really going on in our lives. And I realized that I was traveling 250 days a year, and I was going so fast, so far, trying to say, hey, I'm doing this thing, and I'm going through the premier lives, I'm going to the lounge, doing this, and I realized that I was so busy in the act of doing that I didn't see what I was becoming. And it was changing me. And when I was stuck all of a sudden, and you and I talked about this because, I was leaning on my closest friends, you being one of them. And I said that, well, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? This and that. So I realized that this was necessary for me to see what was really important in my life. Because the bottom line is this, is that, like you said, when people are getting on social media trying to figure out what was going on, which is the worst thing to do, because they're just going on they're focused on a crowded cloud of confusion, calamity, and chaos. Isn't that the truth? Because that's what you're going to see on social media, is this fear mongering, and people they're all crowded in this cloud of confusion, calamity, and chaos. And you know what that means? Is that they cannot see the world of connection and community if they're stuck in that cloud. Because the cloud, you use the metaphor, I'm going to use one too. The cloud represents a lie. What's outside the cloud represents the truth. And so although we're rowing and it's some rocky waters, stormy seas, right? Stormy seas. If we know that we're rowing toward a goal that's going to be better than it was before, we shouldn't complain about the storm that we're going through, because it sometimes takes that problem for us to have our purpose.
And to add 2 things here.
Bring it.
We talk about our friend John C. Maxwell.
Love
Well,
John.
I know I'm reading. It's just right now slow read because I've been reading other stuff and just
Which book?
sharing
He's
this.
got over 80.
I know. No, the 15 invaluable laws of growth, and we're talking about a growth mindset. We've been talking about a growth mindset, and especially in a time like now.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the next Project Hope project is mindset mastery. We're going to focus on that with speakers that have never talked about mindset. So it's going to be interesting, right?
Yeah, no, definitely going to be interesting. But I'm going to say something, and there was one chapter I recently read, which is chapter 4, the law of the pause.
Yeah, the law of the pause. That's right. Yeah.
And in order, we run our lives busy. We're not mindful. We're not mindful of the time we have. And all of a sudden, let's say, for example, it's a Wednesday. It's a Wednesday, and we woke up in the morning, going about our lives, being busy. But then we look at our watches. It's 5 p.m. What did we do that day to stimulate growth? What did we do? And I'm not talking about just professional growth,
but the vision growth we were talking about.
The vision.
Right.
And also family growth.
Yes.
My kids. My kids are home. They're not at school right now. But did I take at least half an hour out of my schedule?
At least, right. Exactly.
To go out, spend some time with them. If it's raining, do an activity with them, or just hanging out, just being with them. And this is one of the creepy things I do as a father. Don't nobody judge me, please. When they're resting, I just look at them. I just observe them.
No, trust me, I don't judge. I think watching a child sleep is the most incredibly peaceful and intimate opportunity as a parent.
Mm-hmm. And it's the most beautiful thing because you see, you realize where did time go? And that's what I'm talking about, pausing and reflecting, whether it be professionally, when it comes to your vision, when it comes to your goals, but family. And even when you talk about the comprehensive fitness, the 7 areas of fitness.
7 dimensions, right, correct.
7 dimensions we're talking
about.
Yeah,
because the University of Pennsylvania, they only refer to 5. They don't have financial, and they group nutritional into physical. So they only go by physical, social, emotional, family, and spiritual. I think that it's important for us to divide nutritional and physical and add financial because if everyone is stressed about finances, especially now, right, during the COVID crisis, then it's something to kind of look at. So I believe in 7 dimensions. Go on.
Yeah, so that's it. So now, we have this growth mindset. Now we're also talking about growth mindset. And this is going to be, Ken, I'm having an amazing time right now. I'm having an amazing time. We can go on for hours.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's as busy as we've been, you, myself, and your lovely wife and my wife, and during these development of Project Hope and everything else, it's been a joyful experience. And I told my wife last night, I told her this last night, and I said, just before going to bed, I said, I hope I never travel ever again. But still can make a living impacting and empowering others somehow in a different way, remotely, or at least I pray that I lose status in my airline so that I can just be home more often, because I've learned more about my children in the last 9 weeks than in the last 9 years.
How
sad, but true. Sad, but true. And so I look at now again this pandemic problem was really a necessary interruption, and so if you're using more metaphors, that this intermission of our live show, well, isn't it true, in the interesting part about any kind of show that has an intermission, that the best part of that show is what happens after the intermission? That's why I think this intermission was necessary, the power of the pause. And so I told my son this morning, because I don't know why it dawned on me until now, and I think all your readers and listeners and audience members will love this, is that I told my son, we need to journal our time and experiences so that we can reflect on our resilience and resolve during this pandemic problem that we went through. Because if we don't remember, we will, what will happen is that we need to be able to focus on the growth that we had as a family, because when we have fear in our ear, it's too hard for us to believe about those things that we went through. And so we're going to start this journaling routine right now and kind of catch up from it about general experiences in March and April and May, and then catch up with it and bring it current for June. But I think that's something that we can all do, is journal about this and look back and pass it down, and saying that, yeah, we went through this pandemic at this, time of 2020, but this is what we learned from it. And because I think that people will really see the value and the power of the pause.
Yeah. And I'll just tell you right now, and I want to quickly, I don't want to end this this
conversation. Go as long as you want to, but I know that you have a certain window there, and I know there's certain things you wanted to talk about ahead of time that we just discussed. We just went on different conversations. I hope that it fit your needs.
Oh, no, you know what? And I enjoy, when it comes to meeting, having conversations for the show. I mean, it's conversation, and we get whatever nugget of information someone gets out of it. That's a win. That's a win. And I want people to smile, show some teeth, while we're listening to this. The power of the pause. We're pausing right now.
Yeah.
However, we're planting seeds. We're planting seeds right now with Project Hope. Help other people endure. And this is something, and you called me up. We had a conversation about this before it started, and we're talking about this strategy, this initiative, this program.
Right, because there are we're hurting. Back in March, we talked about it and said, we're hurting, but there are other people that are hurting worse than us. I got a message from my buddy that's in Cebu, Philippines, saying that he wakes up at 4:00 in the morning to drive on his moped for 3.5 hours to wait in line for another 3 hours for a loaf of bread. That put things in perspective. And I said that, honey, I think we need to do something, even though we're hurting. We'll figure it out, but there are other people that are worse off, right? And she just gave me this piece of paper that said Project Hope. And of course, me, I'm turning it into an acronym. Help other people endure. Called you up and said, hey, what do you think? Because you're my sounding board, right? And you said, dude, you had me at hello, right? And so, gathering all of these speakers in our circle of influence, and some that have never dreamt, like Wendy Major and a few others, never dreamt of speaking at all. Right. And we said that, hey, look, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others. That is the African proverb. Right. And so I said that let's bring 5, roughly, maybe 6 speakers into the mix of this for every 2-hour webinar. And everyone gets it TED Talk style: story, strategy, call to action. Some people call the call to action a takeaway. Right. So what happens is that we had this wonderful collection of people's perspectives of their problems and how they are growing from the experiences, and the value to the audience members was exponentially great. Now, that was the primary purpose, was to lift people out of dark days and help them triumph over tough times. Right. The secondary purpose is, as you know, but your audience members may not know, is that we knew some people in the industry that were hurting bad, and not just that guy in the Philippines, but this woman where her husband left her during the COVID crisis, and she has 3 daughters to care for now as a single mom, and no one's buying her clothing apparel that she designs and that she makes with her little ladies that do things in the sewing shop and where she lives, right? And so she's wondering about groceries the next week. So we told everyone during that first webinar on April 3rd, hey, look, if you want to be a part of this and really lift someone else up, we got a GoFundMe page for it. And it wasn't much, but $800 was raised that first night, right?
Wonderful.
Right, but that was 2 loads of groceries for her. A lot, you know, just to not worry about food. And it was enough for her to not have that much of a worry on what's going on and bringing food on the plate, so that she can now convert her clothing apparel, her fitness clothing apparel business, and convert it into making masks. And she's booming with sales. But she never would have seen that opportunity if she was still stuck on the problem of the pandemic. If she was focused on the problem, she wouldn't see the opportunity. Mm-hmm. And so Project Hope, where we just did our 7th 2-hour webinar that is now continuing education credit approved by the American Council on Exercise and CanFitPro, the Canadian Fitness Professionals. We justify those CECs by making certain that we have a certain amount of behavior change science in every single episode, which is mostly why I open it and close it as the host, right? And we always review the materials. But when you came on board, dude, I've never seen you speak, and you were on fire. It was organized. It had some incredible takeaways. You were timely, which not a lot of the other speakers were, okay? And I felt like, wow, I know how to use this information. And I think that even CanFitPro COO, Maureen Hagan, Mo, was on the call too, wasn't she?
Yeah, and she made a comment on Facebook when I said something about realizing my dream, because it's a BHAG of mine, a big, hairy, audacious goal of speaking at a fitness conference. It's been for years, I think in 2015, roughly around that time frame. And I for some reason, I couldn't pinpoint the origin of the reason why I wanted to do this. But then I figured it out, is how I make people, how I feel impacting others. And if I can do that on a mass scale, that's why I started this podcast, because I applied to speak at this year's conference, which is changing format. And I said, you know what? I'm going to prepare my content. I'm going to prepare my confidence. Start a podcast. And I have all this content now that I can use, which I used for the 2 keynote addresses for Project Hope. Now,
which were phenomenal.
Thank you.
They really were.
Oh, I'm honored. I'm really honored, and I appreciate that, because it means a lot, especially coming from you, and that support. And I'm grateful for that. And every time, you know, I just smile. I think about that moment. It was an adrenaline rush, and I was messaging one of our colleagues from that, Lindsay, and I was like, wow, I'm still on an adrenaline rush right now. But it was a fun experience, and to see, you know what, to speak like that, considered as a conference, in my eyes, that's a win.
It was a conference, because as you know, our handouts are 24 to 30 pages each time, and which that's crazy too, right? Yeah. But when you came out there as one of the most polished speakers, I looked and I kept thinking to myself, and I was muted. I kept saying, I can't believe this. He looks like he's been doing this for 20 years.
I'll tell you something right now. In this book I held up, I have some notes from your speaking workshop.
Oh, tell me about it.
And it was talking about the power of the pause and an engagement with the audience. Even though we're virtual, I was in gallery view on Zoom, where I saw everybody. I didn't look at one person.
That's a good way to do it. Hollywood Square style, right? I dated myself on that show.
And I was like, ooh, who's the Brady Bunch person? Who's the...
Well, go on. Yeah, you were looking on gallery view, so you saw everybody, and it was a packed audience, right?
And I was looking at everybody's reactions. I was gauging.
Right.
And then when I did, I didn't do the
It
call
determines your flow of your performance, right?
exactly. And how long do I go with the story? Right.
Right, right.
And
Because the
then,
Canadian Speaking Association says, you know, 2 to 3 minutes on the story and 5 minutes on the strategy, right? National
yeah,
Speakers Association is somewhat the same. Toastmasters is even less, depending on the venue, right? But I told everyone, no, people are hurting a little bit more. So I said 5, 5, and 1. 5 minutes on the story, 5 minutes on the strategies, 1 minute on the takeaway, right?
mm,
But I said, don't be restricted to that because I want you to go with flow. Go on.
yeah. So that's what I did. And I looked and I said, and then I thought of something interesting because a lot of us, a lot of people were doing takeaways at the end. Keep people engaged by doing takeaways incrementally. So my principles of resilience, like the first one, celebrate the small wins,
Oh yeah,
the big wins.
yeah, yeah. You do trust me. People were putting in the chat bar. They loved how you did that.
So, and I did that for the other things too. And my favorite one was, that one actually, because I told everybody, give a high five to the nearest person. Let's give a high five on a screen, and high five first, explain later. And that's what I did. And it just, you saw everybody doing it. And I had people I even shouted out hoo-ah, and everybody shouted back. And it just, and you
Which
bring
is
that
now
up.
our going thing now, right?
Yeah. And,
Yep.
and you know what? And it creates connection. And that's what I noticed in my classes as well, that I've created that community, through your teachings, where I ask people, are we fired up? How, and everybody shouts back, hoo-ah. I use that because that's what I learned, and it works. Everybody loves it. It gets out of the first timers a little bit out of their comfort zone, but then they enjoy it. So that's how that was.
Well, that's because some of them are still sitting in their jammies, in Singapore as they're waking up while it's the nighttime for us, and we're all shouting all of a sudden, and they're waking up their people in their apartment or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, oh, but I did it. It felt good.
Yeah. No, it's like, yeah, no, I'm like, oh, who's this guy?
Yeah.
But no, that was my strategy. That was my strategy. And even taking the time to speak. And I think a lot of speakers
They rush
will
it.
rush, either because they're nervous or it's because they have a lot of information. And if you have a lot of information, it means you have to cut it down.
Yeah, you have to cut it down. And the way that you paused in between a lot of your deliverables, your takeaways, allows people to digest it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like when you've chewed the food and it's going down, and then you take the glass of water and it washes it down all the way. That's what you gave them the time to do that.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I said, it looked like you've been doing it for 2 decades at least.
Well, you know what? I'm ready for prime time.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm going to help you with that. We'll talk about that behind the scenes.
Oh,
Sound
yeah,
good?
definitely. Yeah, I'm tracking. I'm good. It's good copy right there. I watched too much Will Willis. Hey, my favorite TV show is SEAL Team. Okay.
Really?
Yeah.
I love it too. It's a shame that we're between seasons right now.
Oh yeah. No, actually I worked out with Neil Brown Jr., the actor who plays Ray Perry, Bravo 2. And the other day with Eric the trainer. So I'm doing Eric's programming, and he gets these celebrities on board, and he was one of the guest celebrities. And I was like, wow. So I decided to put on
I didn't know that.
It's really fun. It's really fun. And I put on my camo. I have a tactical camo top. I have my Canadian flag, my badge here with my name tape. And it was just fun. By the way, doing push-ups and that is like hot, but you know what? It was fun. Now, I want to ask you one thing.
Okay.
The way Project Hope is now.
Yes.
The way it has grown in the past, I'll say 2.5 months. Did you see it reaching these heights?
Yes. And no. Because we don't know the way this journey will unfold when we're rowing that boat through those rocky waters.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know if we're navigating perfectly, and we constantly reassess and re-navigate and row forward. But you know, you and I talked about this privately, but that Project Hope came to me in 3 phases. That the first phase was these 2-hour CEC approved webinars that we're going to do for a certain period of time to lift people out of dark days and help them triumph over tough times. And then the next phase would be a full virtual conference where we can go beyond the 10-minute version and really immerse ourselves. And you know, because like, remember what I said when you finished your second performance of the Project Hope with your leadership team, I quickly turned to all of you and I said, now give me a 45 to 60-minute version right away and start working on that now, right? And I believe that you have some accountability with Stephen on that one, right? And I'm working with Amanda. And so, because that's the second phase. And the third phase will be some people, there's probably going to be 5 to 10% of the people that go to the conference are going to want even more of a intimate connection and continued coaching. And so that will be the birth of the third phase, which will be the mastermind. Brendan Bouchard says, don't use the word mastermind anymore. He calls them mentorship programs, but you know what I mean. And so that's the 3 phases that came to me, is why I say yes, but no, because it's taken so many different organic growth spurts that I didn't really see it coming quite like this. Like Singapore having their own Project Hope, Lebanon and Philippines still want to come on board with it too, right?
Yeah.
And by the time that your audience members hear this, will be probably the time that we are explaining to them that this first phase, these 2-hour webinars, are going to have a season finale with episode 10. So your audience members will be the first to hear it, which doesn't mean that we're ending anything. It's actually, we're actually giving breathing room to go to that next phase, that next better thing, which is the immersion course, that virtual conference, which of course you are a part of without a doubt. And so, yeah, I guess now the cat's out of the bag. Your audience members are the first to hear before it gets out on the streets that we're on episode 7. Episode 8 is Friday. Episode 9 is Tuesday. And episode 10 is the season finale on the 30th of June. There will be no more 2-hour webinars unless we go into another crisis, God forbid, right? Mm-hmm. And so the next step would be the immersion course, the virtual conference.
And it's going to be exciting. And it's like climbing a mountain, right? You got to set up camp for a little bit, catch your breath, take stock of inventory, and then resume.
Exactly.
Now, and it's exciting stuff. By the way, so before we continue, how can people learn more about Project Hope?
Right. So we're building the website because it's a lot what was hanging on that was the 501c3 status, because it needs to be it needs to remain in the container of the nonprofit world, because that's what it was designed for. That's the mission statement behind it all. So in the meantime, we were using, as you know, the Facebook group Project. It's facebook.com/Project Hope Academy. And when they go there, they're going to see, and it's grown. I mean, goodness, we've only had that page for 3.5 weeks, and it's already near 1,000 people, and very supportive people. And we're using that where everyone can put no solicitation, no political rants, and even no religious rants, even though we have people that are really grounded in faith, and that's part of their journey, right? Like it is for me, but it was meant simply just to be inspirational And that's also where we're posting all of the official training materials, like the handouts and the recordings, that are post-Zoom event, right? And it's been sort of our microsite for what will eventually become projecthopeacademy.com.org and whatever else. But right for now, facebook.com/Project Hope Academy.
Fantastic. And on Instagram too, at Project Hope Academy. Follow that. A lot of inspiration, a lot of hope to fuel the resilience tank. And one final question.
Sure.
And I got it.
I could do this all day. You're great,
yeah,
buddy.
I know. I could do this all day too.
In fact,
and I'm having a blast.
I'm committing to you. Let's do it again.
Yeah, we are going to do it again.
Okay, so let's do a part 2 and even whatever. Let's go from there.
We're going to go from there. So, and I'm going to keep on going. And rapid fire question. Just one question for now.
Bring it.
Origin of hoo-ah.
Yeah. Well, the oldest reference I could find when I was going through Soldier of the Year competitions, which is now called Best Warrior in the Army, and what it was is, they take the top soldiers in each unit and they keep competing until they can be the all Army Soldier of the Year, and I've won it at division level or higher 6 times, and I was told I couldn't run anymore. But I really took it seriously because it required a lot of your tactical skills, but it also took strategic, and I had to do a lot of military history referencing because these sergeants major would be on this panel and they would grill me while I'm in the position of attention with all of my medals and everything on my jacket, and they would grill me on military history. And so the reason why I won a 5th Army competition a long time ago was I was the only one who can answer that as close to the oldest historical reference. And it was in 1943, somewhere in the Philippines, during the battles of World War II, that we were having a tough time taking this hill that the Japanese had made this pillbox, which is a bunker. And the only way to kind of aggress up there and ascend to there to try and fight against the Japanese there was through these narrow ravines, and it was tough because you could only go up there in small units, and the Marines were there and they were doing a fantastic job, but the reality was that it was a bad terrain, and they had really no way of going up there in force, and as a result 70% on the average of every squad that went up that hill came back wounded or dead. And this went on for weeks. And until this one Army unit showed up, an Army infantry unit. And it has nothing to do with Army versus Marines, because that inter-office rivalry went out the door during the Middle Eastern conflicts, that we realized that we're all wearing the same camouflage and we all bleed the same color. And we should really start to think about that, right? And so I remember the Army, when I'm reading the story, it was about this Army lieutenant that was just looking up at that cacophony of dissonance and all the explosions. But what he saw, being resilient, he saw not the obstacle, he saw the opportunity, he saw the glory of battle. He saw the glory to do something that was a life-changing moment. But his platoon sergeant was a fixed mindset person, not a growth mindset person like the lieutenant. And the platoon sergeant been in the military for decades. And, he's sitting there with a cigarette in his mouth. And the type of guy I'm talking about, where the ash is hanging out about 4 inches, but it doesn't drop. And you wonder, how did he do that, right? But he's seeing all the wounded and dead come down, right? And he's seeing the reality of battle. And so in that, all those explosions, and again, the cacophony of dissonance, that lieutenant, and the reason why the lieutenant was so into it is because his dad was in the military. His granddad was in the military. He was a legacy lieutenant. And so he had purpose. He had passion. And so he looks over right there, and he looks over at the platoon sergeant and says, "Platoon sergeant, we're going to take that hill." And the platoon sergeant goes, "Who, us?" Hoo-ah. And what it meant was, all right, Lieutenant, if no one else will do it, we will, and we will prevail. And that became HUA, which some people actually spell HUA, heard, understood, acknowledged. And what it means is that it's a battle cry. And it means that I understand you, sir, I got this, I'm going to accomplish my mission. But it really goes back to that one tale where, who, us? Well, no one else is here. All right, Lieutenant, we got it. We'll take that hill. Mm. And isn't that what we should be looking at, what's going on now in life? Because we cannot have a testimony unless our life has gone through a trial. You cannot turn a test into a testimony unless you've really gone through that trial. And so, I leave you with that understanding that we're all at times sitting on struggle street. I hear you. You've been there. I've been there. But the resilient approaches and the growth mindset approaches and the HUA approach is that no one else is going to do it, but you can, because you are worthy. You do not have shame in your life. You've eliminated that through this podcast and more. And what you need to understand is that your voice matters. It could be that one thing that lifts someone out of their trial so that they can take that test and turn it into a testimony.
Amen. Amen to that. Well, we're going to end this conversation on that note, this awesome note, powerful note. Now, before we end, are we fired up? I love it.